Hi, I'm John Molesky, host of Dialogue, on the set of the program where we just conducted a discussion where we're connecting the dots between a couple of big ideas, climate change, energy consumption, and then how that affects security. We have a couple of people who work for the military in their respective countries with us. Assistant Secretary of Defense Sharon Burke here from the United States, and Rear Admiral Neil Morisetti from the UK. And also with us is the director of the Wilson Center's Environmental Change and Security Program, Geoff Dabelko. And one thing I didn't get to ask you in the longer discussion that I wanted to ask about is a bit melodramatic perhaps, but how much of your work or your preparation is in anticipation that some of these scenarios can lead to conflict? I mean, I know we're talking about security in a broader sense than in just military activity, but I know there are concerns out there that some of these issues, migration, new shipping lanes to defend because of melting ice caps, that they could lead to military, old-fashioned military security issues. How much of your work is
I think you've got to recognise where are the potential issues that could cause conflict. I mean, climate change itself is unlikely to be a direct cause of conflict, but for reasons as you just described, perhaps people lost their land or their livelihood, they're pressed into action which may or may not be legitimate, may put pressure on their government, then there's a risk of conflict. And what we've got to do is to work to try and reduce those risks. I call it conflict prevention, to build capacity and resilience in countries which don't necessarily have that at the moment through a combination of national and international aid, diplomacy, to an extent some a small part for the security forces, but all of that working towards stronger countries that can meet these challenges, whilst at the same time trying to give them the tools in the form of, say, more better resistant strains of rice for where temperatures are rising or other things like that, in order that the risks are reduced.
One of the things that we hear about the U.S. military is that its new role of responding to natural disasters, is certainly a challenging one that stretches resources. How much of our planning revolves around these scenarios where what if there's major flooding? What if there are major earthquakes? And we don't even have to talk about them in the what if. They've been happening. How much is the U.S. military adapting to those potential outcomes?
Well, I think for the U.S. military, first, our premier strategy documents do look at climate change as an instability accelerant. So we are looking at the underlying conditions and where our interests are and what we need to be ready for, and then taking into account how climate change will affect those interests and those places where we're concerned about. And I think it is certainly a challenge for any military at any time, but I think particularly for the United States military at this time, and for our allies and partners, which is we do have to be ready for a very broad range of missions in a very broad range of places. And how do you create an armed force that's ready for something like a humanitarian relief mission, and at the same time, you always have to be ready for conventional combat. That's your job, to defend the country. It is a challenge, and we are spending a lot of effort looking at capabilities that we need to have that are flexible across a range. And certainly in the area that I work in most directly, energy, what we're developing that helps a forward operating base in Afghanistan operate independently will be very useful in a humanitarian disaster. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, is how can we be ready for this broad range?
Geoff, one thing that we discovered in the course of our longer discussion is that this is not nearly enough time allotted for the scope of the issue. So I'm wondering if you could, as someone who is studying this all the time, share with our viewers some ideas on where are the best sources of information if they'd like to learn more on their own.
Well, interestingly, the respective offices of our guests are certainly a rich source for what the different governments are doing.
You're such a gentleman.
Well, but it actually also happens to be true. It's not just being polite. I think there are a couple of nodes of activity. There's, for those who want the academic research, there is evolving work that is both kind of looking at all cases around the world and then in great depth for specific areas. For those who are interested in some of that research and how it translates into a policy context, then there are think tanks and research institutes that are very active in this space. Sharon's old shop, the Center for New American Security, we like to think we're doing that here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. A place like CNA are doing that. And there are a number of counterparts in the UK that are doing the same, some in Germany as well, particularly spending a lot of time on this. So one can find that. And then When it comes to the different national governments, it's a bit more of a challenge as to which office to find, but there is activity, not just at places like in Europe and the United States, but lots of interest and activity, for example, in small island states and very different security
stakes are high there.
Which interestingly then translates to a final area, which is within the United Nations system. And you will find different entities coming at these issues from their respective angles. The UN Security Council this last July had an active debate on climate security that produced all sorts of statements, many of which seeing this issue as an important one, some active debate as to whether the Security Council was the right place or not, while still recognizing the challenge that climate poses. So there's a range of resources, some of which in the practitioner community, some of which in the academic community, that folks can draw upon and tackle this really complex set of linkages.
Well, sincere thanks to all of you for sharing your time and expertise with us today. And if you'd like to hear more from our guests, visit us on the web at wilsoncenter.org. And on the upper right-hand part of the screen, you'll see a tab for TV and radio. And if you click there, you can find the complete 30-minute dialogue program with our guests. Thanks.